This document was never intended for the public. It gathered dust in a private collection for almost 100 years, in a locked box, forgotten in the basement of an old house on the outskirts of West Orange. Its author, a man whose name became a symbol of progress. And yet, this text has nothing to do with light bulbs, phonographs, or dictaphones. This is not a scientific report. This is a confession. In the final months of his life, Thomas Alva Edison kept notes, personal, candid, almost whispered into a notebook, which apparently was meant for his closest friend and assistant. And only now, thanks to the efforts of an independent researcher, these lines have become known to a select few. The first thing that catches the eye, there is no usual introduction, no date, only a phrase scratched across the top edge of the page. If someone finds this, read with caution. Some truths are too heavy for the unprepared mind. Then silence, and only a few lines later and the first revelation. All my life I was called an inventor, a man who creates devices that move civilization forward, but almost no one knew what I was truly obsessed with. I wanted to build a bridge between this world and the one that comes after. He writes that his interest in the beyond was not a whim of an old man tired of fame. Even in his youth, after the death of his mother, he began to ask himself, where does the warmth go that fades from a dead body? Where does the voice disappear, the one that just spoke, laughed, argued? Can it really all be emptiness? The scientific approach demanded evidence. I didn't want to believe. I wanted to know. In these notes, he claims, the work on his final project, the so-called device for communicating with the dead, was not a newspaper invention or a product of imagination. It existed, and I nearly perfected it. Here the description becomes technical, but soon he returns to the essence. This was not spiritualism, not talking with ghosts, not occultism. This was an attempt to create a receiver capable of capturing the energy of consciousness after the death of the body. Edison claims that consciousness is a form of energy, and therefore it does not disappear, but merely changes form, by analogy with electricity, which does not vanish after a device is turned off, but continues to exist in the system. If a thought is a wave, then there must be a device capable of catching it. A radio receives a voice sent from thousands of miles away. Why not capture a voice sent from beyond? He describes early experiments. At first, silence. Then, faint interference, strange rustling sounds, as if someone was breathing directly into the receiver. Sometimes, fragments of phrases. No one could say for sure where they came from, but Edison believed these were not coincidences. These were traces of someone's presence. I began to notice, Edison writes, that at a certain time of day, the device behaved differently. Between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, the signal strength increased. There was a feeling as if someone was trying to respond. He clarifies that he did not conduct the experiments alone. There were witnesses, engineers, lab assistants, even one doctor, but he strictly forbade them all from keeping records or speaking about it. He wasn't afraid of ridicule, he was afraid of being stopped. Humanity is not ready yet. I saw it in their eyes. They want light bulbs, electricity, convenience, but not truth. Truth is frightening. According to Edison, the key to the device lay not in amplifying the signal, but in synchronizing it with certain frequencies of the brain. Consciousness does not die, he claims. It shifts to another range, like a radio station. And if you catch the right wave, you can hear what was never meant for the ears of the living. He describes a moment that changed him forever. October 1925, third night in a row, the device is on. The room silent. Only the hum from the resonator, and suddenly, a voice. Female. Quiet. Not English, but I understood. She said, "I am here. I didn't leave." He writes that he felt no fear, only awe, a deep internal response. He recognized the voice. It was Mary, his mother, who had died more than half a century ago. This was not imagination, not a dream. I don't believe in hallucinations. My mind was always clear. I knew it was her. After this experience, Edison ordered a new, improved version of the device to be assembled, but each subsequent experiment became increasingly strange. The voices did not come when called, but when they wanted to. Sometimes unfamiliar, sometimes many at once, murmuring, as if many people were speaking through a thickness of water. Some called my name, some cried. He began to keep an observation journal, which was later destroyed by Edison himself. The reason, unpredictability. I realized, behind the veil, chaos, not kind angels, not balanced spirits. There are many consciousnesses, some bright, some mad, and the longer I listened, the harder it became to maintain clarity. In one of the notes he writes, one voice kept repeating, "You opened the door. You won't close it back." After this event, Edison ordered the experiments to be halted, but as he admits, the thoughts of what he had heard never left him for a single day. I tried to forget, kept myself busy with routine work, conversations, newspapers, but at night I heard that whisper again, without the device, inside my own head. He no longer turned on the apparatus, but he also didn't destroy it. The device was hidden, in an unknown location, and to this day, no one knows whether it has survived. I began to understand, Edison writes, that the boundary between life and death is not as solid as we are used to thinking. It is not a wall, but a veil. And the more I tried to lift it, the more I felt that it was looking back at me. He admits that after the experiments with the device, his perception of reality changed. Sometimes I saw things out of the corner of my eye, silhouettes, shadows, inexplicable flashes of images that didn't belong to me, as if someone was passing by or waiting. Scientific curiosity began to mix with inner unease. Like all scientists, I believed in control, in measurements, in logic. But what I encountered could not be explained by formulas or theory. It was a different realm, not of physics but of metaphysics. He began to search for explanations not only in science, but also in ancient texts. He studied the Kabbalah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the works of the Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg. In them he found strange parallels to what he heard through the receiver. They all spoke of one thing. Consciousness does not belong to the body. The body is a temporary vessel. Consciousness is a wanderer, and death is not the end, but a transition. But what struck him most was not this. It was what happened to him personally. I began to feel a presence, especially in the hours before dawn. The room was empty, but the air, dense, as if I was not alone. He writes that he began to hold mental dialogues with this presence. Sometimes he received answers, simple but precise. I asked the question, why suffering? The answer came immediately, so you don't forget that you are alive. He began to perceive death not as a tragedy, but as a stage, as the end of one shift and the beginning of another. If people knew that death is not the end, they would live differently, with less fear, with more meaning. However, Edison harbored no illusions. He knew truth is dangerous. If you give a person proof of the soul's immortality, what will he do? Accept it as a gift, or use it as an excuse for irresponsible actions? He understood. Knowledge requires maturity. That is precisely why he never made his device public. It's still too early. The world must first learn how to live before it attempts to speak with the dead. He returns again to the experience with his mother's voice. He calls that moment the most important of his life, more important than the invention of the light bulb, more than the phonograph. Because in that moment I understood, love does not die. Neither distance nor death can destroy the true bond between souls. He concludes this part of his notes with a phrase written especially carefully, as if he wanted it to be remembered. We don't create a connection with those who have passed. It already exists. It always has. We are simply learning to listen. Over the years, Edison writes, the fear of death left him, not because he became fearless, but because he stopped seeing death as the enemy. Death is not evil. Evil is forgetting why you are alive. He reflected deeply on the nature of consciousness. He was convinced it is not a product of the brain but something greater, like a radio signal, with the brain merely a receiver. The mind is not confined to the skull. It extends beyond the body, beyond time. He offers analogies. When a person dies, consciousness simply disconnects from the receiver, but continues to exist, in another state, in another dimension. If you turn off a phonograph, the recording does not disappear. It still exists on the record. It's the same with us. According to him, everything a person thinks, feels, experiences, does not disappear, but is recorded. Not in the ether, like sound, but in a space he calls the higher field, similar to what Hindus call the Akashic records. All thoughts exist. All emotions remain. We are immersed in an ocean of memory. We just don't know it. He shares a strange experience that occurred 2 years before his death. In a dream, he saw a room bathed in soft light. There were people there. Faces, familiar but forgotten. One of them approached and said, "You're almost ready. Don't be afraid. This is not the end. This is a reunion." Upon waking, Edison felt an unusual calm, as if someone inside whispered, "Everything will be fine." Since then, he began to perceive each day as preparation for a return, not to disappearance, but to connection. He especially emphasizes, death is not the erasure of personality. We don't lose ourselves, we lose the shell, but everything that was real in us remains. In one of his last entries, he notes that the most frightening things in life are not death, but emptiness. When a person lives without purpose, without love, without thought, they are already dead. But when someone dies who lived with love, they continue to live. He often returns to the idea of responsibility. If we are immortal, then everything has consequences. Every word, every action echoes in the universe. This is true science, the science of cause and effect, not limited by life. He writes with sorrow that humanity is too occupied with technology to hear the inner voice. We've learned to transmit sound across oceans, but we haven't learned to listen to our own hearts. And again, a reference to the device. The machine wasn't a mistake. The mistake was the desire to use it out of curiosity. It's a tool, but it can only be used with respect and pure intention. In his final lines, Edison writes not as an engineer, but as a man standing on the threshold of a great mystery. My path is complete. I gave the world electricity, sound, light, but the most important thing I wanted to give was hope. Not the promise of paradise, not religious dogma, but a simple, quiet certainty. We do not disappear. A person does not vanish without a trace. Everything that was real cannot be erased. He recalls how, in childhood, he once heard an old man on a bench say to a boy, "To fear death is to not understand life." At the time, he paid it no mind, but now he understands. Words once spoken in passing have become the meaning of his final years. We are not afraid of what's over there. We are afraid of losing what's here. We are afraid to forget, to run out of time, to leave things unsaid. But if you know that everything real remains, then fear fades away. He mentions that in recent days, voices have begun to visit him again in his dreams. They were calm, without reproach. Someone spoke his name and said, "We're waiting." These were not just dreams. They felt like a hand already reaching from beyond, ready to receive him. These dreams were not nightmares. They were like memories that haven't happened yet, like letters from the future, written by someone who knows the meeting is inevitable. I feel that I will soon cross over, but not as a fugitive, not as someone condemned. I go as a student who finally returns home after a long journey. Over there is not emptiness. Over there is continuation. He once again raises the topic of the device. I left the blueprints, not so that someone might repeat my mistakes, but so that one day, when humanity becomes wiser, it can use this bridge not for sensation, not for power or control, but for love, for connection, for truth, the kind that can be felt but not measured. He insists, the most important thing is not proof, but change in life. Even if you find out for sure that the soul is immortal, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you live the same, or will you become better? The choice is yours. He writes that the true purpose of existence is the development of consciousness, not comfort, not power, not accumulation, but growth. Through compassion, through effort, through self-discovery, through the ability to listen to others and be heard. Every action is a seed, every choice a direction. We do not create the future, we create eternity. We do not sow into the ground, but into infinity. And yet, despite his inner peace, there is a tense silence in these words, as if he is trying to convey something very important, almost in a whisper, afraid he won't be heard. He doesn't give answers. He asks questions. Questions that stay with you and echo in your mind when silence falls. He writes, I am not a saint. I am not a prophet. I'm just a man who spent his whole life searching for the truth. And now, at the very end, I see, it was always near. Not in formulas, not in instruments, but in silence, in love, in presence, in memory. He compares death to morning fog. At first it seems that everything disappears, but then you realize everything simply became something else, invisible but still close. We do not lose, we return. Edison speaks of the unity we will all return to sooner or later. We are not separate beings. We are parts of one light. We are sparks, temporarily separated so that we may return stronger. And when we meet there, beyond the veil, we recognize one another, because we never truly forgot. Memory is not something stored in the mind. It is something that lives in the soul. He asks us not to be afraid, not to blindly believe, but to reflect, and to be honest with ourselves. If you're reading this, it means you're ready. Ready to ask questions that don't have easy answers. Ready to seek. Ready to hear what can't be heard with ears. Because truth does not need to shout. It always speaks quietly. Thank you for staying with us until the end. And most importantly, write in the comments, what do you believe in? Have there been moments in your life when you felt someone's unseen presence? We read every response, and believe me, your experience may be important to someone else.